Nate Diaz, what are you doing, man? What happened now? That's all I want to know. We're about to find out my opinion and my thoughts on this. What happened now? So Nate takes to Instagram, Twitter, and puts out a very cryptic message, basically giving a big F you to the fight game, basically saying he's going on tour and peace out. He says, he alludes to something along the lines of F the rematch. It was over before it ever started. I'm going on tour and peace out, fight game. Ugh. It's just so frustrating. What is going on? This is twice in the last 30 days that Nate Diaz has said peace out to the fight game. It's twice. The first time he did it was over USADA flagging him for a potential anti-doping policy case. I don't know. Anyways, USADA said potentially something was awry. He says peace out to the game. The UFC comes running and says, whoa, 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 we'll fix this. Dana White does just that. He gets on there and he fixes it. Fights back on the BMF title. USADA chills. Kind of goes to show you how much power the UFC still has over USADA, doesn't it? Anyways, now Nate's doing the exact same thing. Peace out, fight world. Dana White made it very clear he did not care to see the rematch. I think he told Nate no, and this is how Nate reacts. How does a child react when they act one way and you give in and they get something? It creates that pattern of behavior pattern. If I act like this, I'll get this outcome. If I don't get my way and I act like this, I'll get my way, right? He learned a couple weeks ago, all he has to do is say peace out, fight game, and Dana White will freak out, bend and fold, and do whatever he wants. Something isn't going his way, I assume, and this is how he reacts. What do you guys think? Break that down for a moment. Don't you think that he thinks that's the way to get things done with the UFC and Dana White? And maybe it is. I don't know. I'm on the outside looking in. I'm just posing the question. Let me pose you this question about the rematch. When the fight got stopped due to the cut, needed to be stopped, Jorge Masvidal goes up to him and says, we're going to run it back. We're going to run it back. In the post-fight speech, he says he's going to run it back. On the post-fight speech with Joe Rogan, Nate Diaz says, we're going to run it back. Right back. Let me ask you a question about that. What are the stipulations that those two are agreeing on? The UFC made very clear that the BMF title would not be contested again. This was a one and done. Whoever won it, and it's over. That's it. That's all she wrote. It was one and done. Does Jorge Masvidal plan on just running it back for the sake of running it back? Or is Jorge Masvidal planning on putting his BMF title up against Nate Diaz for a second time? Will the UFC allow Jorge to put the belt up? Will they sanction that fight as a title fight, a BMF title fight? They've already said no, they weren't going to do that. They've already made that crystal clear. What is Nate's expectations? Is Nate's expectations that Jorge Masvidal is going to run this fight back? Is Jorge Masvidal's expectation, or is Nate's expectations that they're going to run it right back for that title? Again, the UFC has made it crystal clear that that title would not be defended. Is Nate willing to run that fight back just on pride alone? To run that fight back just to get the W? Or is he expecting the BMF belt? I would. If I say let's run it right back, I would say let's run it right back the way it was. Right back. And if Jorge Masvidal promised me that fight right back in that moment, I would expect Jorge Masvidal to mean it, as in run it back for this belt. Now, every champion, when they win a belt, they get to keep a belt. So if you won the belt and you fought 7 times and defended it 7 times, you have 7 belts. The UFC said they will not be running this belt back. It's not a contended belt. It's a one and done. So that means they're not going to make a second belt. So is Jorge willing to give up his only belt to Nate? No way. Because that's something Jorge's going to pass down to his children and their children and their children and so on until the end of time. That their great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather once fought for the BMF belt. He's not going to give that up. Are you nuts? You think he's going to run his one and only belt back against Diaz? Anyways, here's what I think is going to happen. I think the UFC is now setting up Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz, the comeback story, for both of them. Both of them are riding a loss. Both of them were dominated in their loss. Their trilogy fight makes more sense now than ever. I'm going to circle back with you guys a little bit. If Jorge Masvidal ran it back with Nate Diaz and the UFC was willing to give them the BMF title again, you understand that if Nate won that, the UFC, Nate and Jorge are obligated to do a trilogy match at that point. So now you're taking Jorge off the market, Nate off the market, and that BMF belt is going to run the next 2 years of their career. You have to. If Nate and Jorge run it back for the BMF title, right back, you have to do a trilogy fight if Nate wins. You have to. You have to. We have to have a clear winner who the BMF really is. I believe we saw that Saturday night. That's what I want to talk about, trilogies on that for a moment. You would just have to. You just have to. Let's run it back to where the real money fight is for Diaz. Let's run it back to the real trilogy we've all been waiting on. The Conor. At this point in Nate's career, at this point in Conor's career, it should be about the money. The money fight. That's all that should matter for both of these guys. Hit that trilogy. Hit that fight up for Nate. Make your money, dude. You don't need that belt. You tried for the belt. You came up short for the belt. Life happens. You're still a stud. You're still a BMF in anyone's eyes. Take the Conor fight. Take the money fight and roll out. But now the UFC is sitting in a beautiful position. So is Conor. So is Nate. If Nate would realize, they could spin this whole marketing ploy on which guy's going to get back in the winner's circle. Which guy's going to come out victorious and get back on their saddle and challenge for a title. Which guy is going to come back? This is a comeback fight for both of them. Conor's riding a loss against Mayweather in boxing and a loss against Khabib Nurmagomedov. Was dominated. Nate's on a great win against Anthony Pettis and was dominated by Jorge Masvidal. That trilogy fight makes more sense now than ever. Who's going to get back in the winner's circle? Who's taking control of their career and is going to come back and dominate the sport at their respected weight? That fight would be bigger now than ever because you're going to bill it as Nate versus Conor 3, the trilogy, and the comeback story. That's exactly what is opened up for Nate and Conor, and the UFC knows it. Conor is probably smart enough to know it. Somebody let Nate in on it. His brother Nick sat out too long. His brother Nick, I believe, couldn't come back and be as competitive as he once was with all this time off. I don't want to see that happen to Nate. I think Nate has millions of dollars still laying on the table. He's just got to come collect it. Come pick it up, man. Come pick it up. Let me know what you guys think. When Jorge said they're going to run it back, did he mean they would run it back for the fight? Or did he mean they would run it back for the title? When Nate heard him say they would run it back and then tells Joe Rogan, we're going to run it back, right back, did he mean they're going to run it back for the title? Or did he just mean they were going to run it back for the sake of fighting? The UFC has already made it clear that they would not be contesting that belt, that that belt was a one and done, the most expensive belt they've ever created. Are they going to make another one so they can run it back? And if Nate would win the rematch and that belt was on the line, they would have to do a trilogy. Done. Their hands would be tied. They're forced to. Or is the UFC, Conor McGregor, and Nate Diaz sitting in a position to make more money than they've ever made in their life by playing the trilogy and the comeback story? Because both of these gentlemen are writing losses. One of these gentlemen would be claimed victorious in a fight, because that's how it happens. 2-man ender, 1 man walks out as the winner. Okay? Do you think that's the case? Marketing-wise, selling it wise, and fighting-wise, one of those guys would get another W at the end of their name, and they would make so much money in that trilogy fight they could ride off into the sunset. Follow me on Twitter at MMA Docket. Follow me on Instagram, James_Tiger_Taylor. And again, thanks for watching. I appreciate you all.